All right, we're now live. You're good to begin.
Welcome. This session will now come to order. As a part of the continued efforts to prevent the spread of novel coronavirus, COVID-19, this session is being conducted by video teleconference. We welcome those of you joining us via the meeting portal and hope that everyone is safe and healthy. I will now read the Education and Professional Standards Board mission statement. The Education Professional Standards Board, in full collaboration and cooperation with its education partners, promotes high levels of student achievement by establishing and enforcing rigorous professional standards for preparation, certification, and responsible and ethical behavior of all professional educators in Kentucky. Sharon Cheshire joins us today as Board Secretary. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, and please call the roll.
You're on mute, Sharon.
Oops, sorry. Okay, start all over. Amanda Ellis. Mary Pat Regan. Melissa Conley Salyers. Here. Elijah Edwards. Sarah Green. Kathy Gunn.
Kathy Gunn, present.
Donna Hedgepath. Tracy Hunt. Jacqueline Mayfield.
Jacqueline Mayfield, present.
Justin Mitchell. Sherry Powers.
Sherry Powers, present.
Lisa Rosinski.
Lisa Rosinski, present.
Stephen Scrivener. I think he's on mute.
I believe he's on a call.
Okay, I'll keep going. Amber Snell.
Amber Snell here.
Carmen Souter.
Carmen Souter, present.
Josh Trosper.
Josh Trosper, present.
Julian Vasquez Hollig. Roll call is complete.
Thank you. As a reminder, no business will be conducted during today's session. This is a chance for members to learn more about the responsibilities of the Education Professional Standards Board and the day-to-day operations carried out by their staff. At this time, I will recognize Kentucky Department of Education Associate Commissioner Rob Akers to get us started. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you all today, and just want to tell you how impressed I was with your first meeting, how well you all were, how you jumped right into the middle of the fast-flowing river and navigated it so well. I'm glad that you were able to take some time or carve some time out of your schedule to maybe let the game slow down just a little bit today so that we can give you a little background information and some contextual knowledge that I think will help moving forward. We are delighted to have this new board in place and to be able to really start working towards setting some goals and digging a little deeper into the work that we're doing. And I really look forward to that work with you all. So what I wanted to do is just to give you a bit of an overview of what our office does, the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. And we're the group of folks who execute the work of the EPSB, at least the majority of it. You're going to hear from a really strong cast of teammates today who have been working for the Education Professional Standards Board for years, and they really know the work inside and out with the regulations, the statutes, the history. I have had to really lean on them and rely on them and come to appreciate them greatly over the last 2 years that I've been working with them in this role. Just to kind of take you back a step, in 2018, the Education Professional Standards Board agency was abolished, and all of that work and all of that business came to the Kentucky Department of Education. The Kentucky Department of Education during that time was going through a big internal reorganization as well, and the old Office of Teaching and Learning, OTL, was split into several different factions, and those roles and responsibilities went to different offices. Well, the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness became the office that was designated to staff the work of the EPSB, and we joined with a division that was at the time called the Division of Next Generation Professionals. And so the idea behind the reorganization was to put the educator pipeline, everything from recruitment all the way to certification to accreditation, kind of all in one place, to be sort of like we laugh about being the one-stop shop for all things teacher. And so when you think of OELE, I do want you to think of the EPSB work, because that is where the largest majority of the work lives. You'll be hearing from our Office of Legal Services. They do a lot of work as well. We work in tandem for the board. But when you think accreditation, certification, those kind of the things that pop into mind when you think of the Education Professional Standards Board, that work lives in our office. From personal experience, I know I've shared this before. When I was in your role and I was a high school principal, I thought I understood the K-12 world pretty well, and I did from being in the school. But that is not a majority of the work you will consider on the EPSB. So it's really important. Well, first to recognize you're going to be drinking from a fire hose in terms of information, but that the staff that we have to give you this information really know the work well, and they can give you the history behind the work. And just in my opinion, my recommendation is really lean on board members like Sherry Powers and Donna Hedgepath, Amanda Ellis, and Julian Vasquez-Heilig, who work in higher ed and in ed prep, because a lot of the work and the policy that you're going to be doing affects those folks directly, and it's important to listen to their perspectives as they are really on the ground where the work will occur. And I feel like if you know that work, then you are way ahead of the ball game. But my guess is you're probably going to need a lot of contextual information from our staff, and just please know that they will do an excellent job of providing all that information for you. So I want to share just a little bit more about the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. We are primarily split into two divisions. One division is our Division of Educator Certification and Preparation. And in that office, that division, that is led by Director Todd Davis. And we have two branch managers. We have Crystal Horde, who oversees the work for educator certification. And we have Allison Bell, who oversees the work of educator preparation. And they're going to go into more detail with you a little bit later on about the work that they do. But in that division alone, any certificates that are issued come through there. We work with all the alternate routes to preparation or to certification. Through those routes, we do veteran recruitment and certification through there. And we do the lead report. All of that occurs on the educator certification side. In addition, our folks work very closely, Crystal especially, with the HR leaders of all the districts, as well as the certification folks at the ed prep providers who are working on getting students, their pre-service teachers certified as well. So there's a lot of important work that goes on there. On the other side of that division is Allison Bell with educator preparation. And the EPSB, and this is some work you're going to be diving deeply into, the goal is to accredit and to approve all programs in our ed prep programs. As you learn more about that, you'll learn that that our ed prep providers all have different missions. You've got huge programs like UK, which is a big Research One institution, all the way down to some that are very small that have very specific regional missions as well. So, and then everything in between. And it's important to kind of understand the role that all of those institutions fill in helping us provide strong, effective teachers for our students in Kentucky. In our other division is the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development, and that is run by Dr. Meredith Brewer and with an Assistant Director, Aaron Ashcraft. In that area, they run a couple of programs with which you may be familiar. One is the Go Teach KY initiative. That was launched about a year ago as an effort for the state education agency, the SEA, to lead in the recruitment of teachers. And through this, we were trying to take the first approach of elevating the profession and to start trying to network teachers. If you've heard of the Teachers Helping Teachers program, that is a result of that. We also have the Kentucky Teacher Ambassadors that are in that program. This has really been something that's gone from 0 to 60 in the course of a year, and we're finally starting to fill in some of the gaps or some of the meat on the skeleton, so to speak, of the program. And there are very few states that take this on. And this was a mission that we felt was important to help support the recruitment. And then within that, we provide a lot of strategies and support around teacher induction, development, retention, those important items. Because when you think about the educator pipeline, you can recruit all you want on one end, but if you don't keep the teachers in the buildings and working with the students, you don't have time to develop them. And then all you're doing is trying to fill a leaky bucket. And with a candidate pool that is not as deep as it once was, it's even more critical to do a better job of not just recruiting, but providing strong induction and development and retention strategies. To that, in that division also lives the Impact KY survey. We launched that out of the office this year. We didn't expect that we were going to be doing Impact Kentucky. We thought it was going to be another iteration of TELL, but our steering committee really, which was made up of teachers, superintendents, principals, state board members, as well as our other K groups, really kind of said, we feel like that old survey may be a little outdated. We'd like to do something different. And with our new vendor, which is Panorama, they had a survey that we were able to kind of custom tailor to the needs of our state. So that new survey came out of our office with a lot of stakeholder input. And you know, the first year of anything is always interesting, but we certainly were acting in the case of trying to glean data that we think was more actionable for our districts. And by and large, I think we've had pretty good feedback on that and look forward to the second iteration now that we've got the baseline information there for our districts. I think it will certainly generate some different conversations that TELL maybe didn't generate in the past. The other two big things that live in this office or in that division is the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, also known as KATE. That's our initiative around minority recruitment and trying to diversify the educator pipeline. That is undergoing some reconstruction, and we're working with the Lieutenant Governor's office to try to see what we can do to get that program back into the funding matrix of the General Assembly in this next fiscal year. It was not funded this year. We were able to cobble together some resources to continue to pay the scholarship stipends to students who are in there. But as part of that program, we're very proud to host the Teaching and Learning Career and Technical Education pathway in our office. And with that, the Educators Rising club that goes with it, or organization that goes with it. What we found is that in our Kentucky programs that has the pathway, the makeup of students in that pathway is more diverse than even the state demographic breakdown that you would find in terms of percentages in our schools. And we know that if we get students recruited earlier, we've got a better chance of keeping them in that pipeline, and that will also help us to further diversify the teacher pipeline and alas, give us some candidates of color and different backgrounds to come in and teach our kids, and so that our kids are more closely represented in the classroom than what we know that we have currently right now. So those are the big programs that we have there. Just a couple other things to share. We've got a couple of kind of, I don't want to call them independent contractors, but we have one project specialist, Eve Prophet, who works for us, who has been working with an initiative called the University Principal Preparation Initiative, UPPI, which was part of we're in our 4th year now. It was part of a very large Wallace Foundation grant, and primarily partnered with Western Kentucky University around reimagining the principal preparation programs. And we were able to enlist several of our other colleges and universities in this work. I know we had a close partnership with EKU in that, with Campbellsville as well, and with UK for all of our higher ed folks who are represented on this board as well. They had designees who participated in this strong work. And Eve has been part of the project management from EPSB and OELE. In addition, we also have the Principal Partnership Project, which goes by P3, and it is a group of 3 principals or former principals who provide a great deal of professional learning and training for principals in the field. One of the things that they do is they conduct all the initial certified evaluation training for the state, and they do the update training to a large degree as well. They, throughout the course of the year, host ed camps and different field-driven focused trainings and professional learning events for our principals. They're one of our most outwardly facing, visible training groups that we have out of our office, and I think they do a really good job. They've been also working very closely with the UPPI work, but they're also working very closely with our educator recruitment development group to train principals on how to better meet the needs of their staff by recruiting and keeping those teachers and being able to develop them, especially in a world that no longer has KTIP as at least some sort of a common approach to induction. So a lot of what we do is trying to provide those resources, but I really enjoy the work that we have when you think about all the way to reaching into high school to recruit future teachers, all the way to going through superintendent programs for school leaders, all the way through that. We also support the National Board program through our office. Our office was very, very instrumental, and Cassie basically wrote the language of the bill to get National Board to be allowed for rank 2 in Kentucky. And we think that's an important way to help grow that as well. So there are more things that live in the office, but I'm going to leave that to our other managers and assistant managers to share with you. So at this time, Cassie, this ends my overview. Madam Chair, board members, it's our pleasure to serve the EPSB, and I'm happy to take any questions or receive any feedback, or if there's anything you think that I need to know that's not a question, I'm happy to entertain all those at this time.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.
If there's no more questions for Rob, I would like to just move a little bit into the next portion of our agenda, which is the responsibilities of the EPSB. And I did send you all an email with some of the materials for today, and included in there was a document, a PDF on responsibilities and some resources for you as board members. If you would like to use that, it's got websites and links to various things. But the EPSB specifically has the statutory authority to set the standards and requirements for obtaining and maintaining a teaching certificate in the state of Kentucky. Now, the main statute that you will be working out of is KRS 161. 028, and that is linked in the materials for you. And specifically, Section 1 of that does enumerate all of those responsibilities that the board has. You're looking at A through X there. So I won't read every one of those subsections to you. The staff today will get a little bit more into the details of that work, but specifically, it really falls into 3 categories. There's educator preparation, educator certification, and then our educator ethics work. And you will again hear from those staff members a little bit later this afternoon. But as you look at that statute, subsection 2 does provide the makeup of the EPSB, and that's the statutory makeup of the board. Rob had touched a little bit on some of the historical information on the board, but when the EPSB was first created by the General Assembly, it was attached to the Kentucky Department of Education. In the early 2000s, the EPSB was separated out so that the board was attached to an independent agency, which also carried the same name, and that maintained in that status until 2018. Now, in 2017, there was an executive order from then Governor Bevin reorganizing the membership of the board. And at that time, that executive order also created rights for the KBE for some oversight of EPSB. And that's the Kentucky Board of Education, through that executive order, had the right to review the EPSB regulations, as well as appeals from the educator cases could be heard by the KBE. The validity of that executive order was challenged by Governor Beshear when he was the Attorney General. Ultimately, that was found to be void, and those rights of oversight for the KBE were ultimately removed. That has not happened in the future executive orders that you've seen. But then in 2018, the executive order reorganized not only the makeup of the board, but also abolished the EPSB agency and attached the board to the Kentucky Department of Education. An executive order, by its nature, is a temporary reorganization that the governor is able to do in between sessions of the legislature, with the intention that the legislature would then take the executive order up at the next session. If the legislature does not, then the executive order expires 90 days after the adjournment of the session. So that is why you've seen these executive orders have happened multiple times, because it has not ultimately been taken up by the legislature yet. But the most recent executive order that we see from Governor Beshear was the executive order that was issued in August of this year, and that is Executive Order 2020-702. And with that executive order, Governor Beshear has really reverted the membership of the EPSB back to similar to what is in statute. So the board is again made up of 17 members that represent different areas of the education community. And we do have 2 ex officio members, which is the president for the Council on Post-Secondary Education, Dr. Aaron Thompson. However, most of the time we will be seeing his designee, which is Dr. Amanda Ellis. And then we also have the cabinet, the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. The Secretary and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman is an ex officio member. However, we most often see her designee, which is Deputy Secretary Mary Pat Reagan. Additionally, with this executive order, it does continue the attachment of the EPSB to the Kentucky Department of Education for administrative purposes. However, the board does retain all of its statutory authority and responsibility, with the exception of selecting an executive director. As there's no longer an independent agency, there's no need for an executive director to be selected. So all of the authority of the executive director has been transferred to the Commissioner of Education, and we're Very excited to have Dr. Glass join us as the new Commissioner and Executive Secretary to the Education Professional Standards Board, and he will be joining us at Monday's meeting. But he does now have the powers that are outlined in statute, and that statute is KRS 161017 for the Executive Director. Those have been transferred to the Commissioner, and they include the appointment of staff to carry out the policy and program directives of this board. And so the staff that you will be hearing from today, that is their responsibility, is to carry out those directives that come from this board. Now, they will really get into a lot of the day-to-day work for you, but when they're talking, they're going to be referencing statutes as well as regulations. The statutes are those requirements that are put in place by the General Assembly. Those are the laws that this board must comply with and follow. Specifically, we're really looking at KRS, which is Kentucky Revised Statute, Chapter 161. Again, that link is in the materials for you, and that will pop up with the entire chapter. Most of the EPSB stuff is really found at the beginning of that chapter. It is KRS 161010 through 161123. And then there are additional statutes where the EPSB is referenced throughout. In some places it will say things such as in collaboration with the EPSB, where we will appear in KBE statutes as well as CPE. But again, these statutes are what the board must follow and must comply with. Neither the board nor staff has the ability to waive the statutes or to change the statutes. Ultimately, that does come from the legislature or to some extent the ability that the governor has through executive order. When we're discussing regulations, though, the EPSB does have the authority to promulgate regulations. That is one of your responsibilities as a board. And the authority to promulgate those regulations comes from the legislature, and they do specify what you have the authority to issue those regulations on. And regulations are also prescribed by Kentucky Revised Statute 13A. That chapter is very prescriptive about what must be in a regulation, as well as what process the regulation has to follow. So also in that responsibilities and resources document that I provided you is an overview of the regulation process and how that works. Currently, the board has adopted a 2-reading process. So when we have either a new regulation that the board is looking to promulgate or making an amendment to a current existing regulation, it will first be presented to the board for information. At that time, you would discuss, then we will bring it back to you with any revisions that occurred during that first reading for a second reading where the board would ultimately take action. Once you take action on a regulation, that doesn't make the regulation itself effective. It does have to go through the Legislative Research Commission and through that process. And I have that process, again, is outlined for you in the materials. So I won't go through every single in and out of that, but it is important to know that once you approve a regulation, we then, it'll be signed by the chair, and it is filed with the Legislative Research Commission in accordance with their procedures. And if we file it by the 15th of the month, then it is published in the following month's register. And there is a public comment period that goes along with that, including a set public hearing date. That hearing date happens between the 21st and the end of the month following its publication. Also, during that time, anybody has the ability to file written comments to that. And then after that, that's when we get into more of the legislative process. It does have to go before the appropriate committees. And ultimately, it looks at about a 6-month process from the time that it is filed until it does become effective. But again, all of that information is in there for you if you would like to get in depth with that. We also have a link to the Legislative Research Commission's website for you. Are there any questions about the statutes versus the regulations? Because the regulations do come from you as a board, you also have the ability to waive a regulatory requirement.
I have a question.
Yes, Lisa.
So the public hearing process of the KAR, do we hold those public hearings or is that held through LRC?
So with the public hearing process, we will set a date that is in compliance with the requirements that LRC has set forth. And then that is actually, typically it's held in person here at the state boardroom. But with the hearing process, we have to receive a request from somebody to attend. They have within 5 days of that. If we do not receive any request, then we are able to cancel that hearing. Most of the EPSB regulation hearings don't actually occur. We very rarely have received requests to attend those. Most people prefer to submit their comments in written form.
Okay, follow up to that. If they submit those comments in written form, do those comments come to the board as well?
So if there are comments received, then there has to be a statement of consideration filed where the board has reviewed those comments and either made the decision of we are going to make amendments based on those comments, or we're going to proceed with the regulation as is.
Okay. And lastly, can you give us an example of a KAR that the board maybe recently has either implemented or revised?
Yes, absolutely. So the EPSB regulations are found in Title 16. Also have that linked for you in the materials, so you can see that. And within that title, we're divided into chapters. For example, Chapter 2 is your certification, most of your certification regulations. But at this time, the board does have 2 regulations that are currently in the LRC process. They actually just completed the comment period. That's going to be 16 KAR 3090, as well as 16 KAR 9010. Both of those were amendments to existing regulations. They just completed the comment period. We did not receive requests to attend the hearings, so those hearings were canceled, and no written comments were received. So we did file the appropriate letters with the Legislative Research Commission, and those regulations are both slated to appear before the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee, also referred to as ours. And that is a legislative committee that will review those regulations, and that is scheduled for Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, again, that's really a brief overview of statutes versus regulations, as well as some of the responsibilities of this board. But I will now turn it over to Allison Bell, who will be talking to you about educator preparation and your responsibilities that fall under that title.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. It's certainly some interesting and challenging times now in education for both our higher education institutions as well as all of our P-12 schools. I'm going to share with you the work of the educator preparation branch. Let me know, I'm attempting to share my screen. Can you all see it clearly?
I don't see anything.
Don't see anything. Okay, well, let me try again. How about now?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. It takes a minute, I think, to load it. So, before we get into that, I just wanted to share with you all a little bit about my background. Prior to coming to work for the Education Professional Standards Board, I taught both Spanish and English in Trimble County for 6 years, and then in a private school at the on the campus of Alice Lloyd College called the June Buchanan School. I started working with the Standards Board in August of 1999, and I have been working with educator preparation since the beginning. So I am into year 22 now of my career with the Standards Board. Seen lots of changes over the past 20 years, and it is challenging and always something new and exciting to learn and try to help our EPPs to navigate all the regulatory work that's part of the EPSB work, but also trying to facilitate collaboration and communication with all of them. And that's been a real blessing over the past 20 years for my career. Hopefully everyone is able to see my screen now, and I'll just quickly go through some of these slides to highlight basically the work of the educator preparation branch. I can talk about a lot of these things for days and am sometimes accused often of getting lost in the weeds. So if I stray too far, please don't hesitate to say, refocus, get back on task. So first of all, what you see is an overview of the work of the branch. We review and approve the educator preparation programs, and those programs encompass both new certification programs as well as continuing programs, which is the process leading up to an educator preparation provider's accreditation visit. The branch also works in the process of accreditation for all of Kentucky's educator preparation providers, the EPPs. We also work with the assessment requirements for Kentucky Educator Certification, with tracking field placement or clinical experiences, the Cooperating Teacher Payment Program, and the student teaching experiences. We facilitate the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement that we call SARA. We work with Option 7 providers to identify prospective Option 7 providers and facilitate their application and approval processes. And we also work with the Continuing Education Option, CEO, Plan 1 and Plan 2, which basically are program options to allow a teacher to earn a rank change. One of the components you'll note is not identified on this slide, and that is internships. Currently within statute and regulation are 2 internships, the Kentucky Teacher Internship Program and the Kentucky Principal Internship Program, both of which are currently unfunded. I won't be talking specifically anymore about Option 7. While we have received 2 notifications of intent to apply, we have not yet received any formal applications for Option 7. The work that we do is guided by regulations, and I've highlighted those here for you. 1010 and 1016 are the regulations that outline the current teacher standards and the teacher leader standards. Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 8 all are related, have some value to what we do in the program review and approval process. Chapter 2 outlines all the teaching certificates. Chapter 3 outlines the administrative certificates, and Chapter 8 talks about the different rank change options. The majority of our work centers around Chapter 5. 010 is the accreditation and program approval regulation, and it has many, many components in it. 020 is the admission to educator preparation programs regulation. 030 is the proficiency evaluation regulation. 040 is the field experience in student teaching regulation. 060 is the literacy requirements. Chapter 6 is the assessments. And Chapter 9 are the alternative routes. Specifically, 060 is the district-based teacher preparation option. 080 and 090 are the two university-based alternative routes to certification. A lot of the waiver requests and program approvals and accreditation decisions that go before the board are based upon these specific regulations. The education or the educator preparation program approval is a significant piece to the work that we present to the board. We ask the board to approve these programs, and they are generally of two types. New program approvals, which means a program has never been offered at that EPP before, and continuing approval, which is part of the accreditation process and is kind of the culminating decision along with accreditation that the board makes. The branch facilitates these processes with all of our EPPs, and it starts with the EPP submitting the documentation. This documentation is a representation of their courses, their accompanying syllabi, field and clinical experiences, demonstration of alignment with national and state standards, program assessments aligned with the state standards, integration of the Kentucky academic standards, program data analysis, and continuous improvement. The review process is multi-layered and documents compliance with the applicable regulatory requirements. The primary program assessments focus on some specific assessment areas. Initial preparation programs, and those are the programs that lead to a person's first certificate. Those assessments measure these 8 areas: content knowledge, which is primarily the Praxis 2 data, the professional capabilities, which is primarily the principles of learning and teaching test data, clinical experiences, candidates' abilities and proficiencies to assess and analyze data, candidates' ability to identify, evaluate, and stipulate personalized student learning, candidate application of content knowledge and pedagogical skills, which is instructional practice, and literacy outcomes. Advanced educator preparation programs, and that's advanced teachers as well as administrators and other school professionals, assess 5 major areas: content knowledge, professional skills and dispositions, data and research-driven decision-making skills, integration of technology in the discipline, and clinical practice. This is a flow chart of the basic program review process. It begins with the EPP submitting its programs for review. The first stage of review is a staff review, and staff is looking for evidence of completion of all the parts are there, as well as documentation of compliance with the applicable regulations. From the staff review, programs are assigned to content review committees. Now, these committees are content area specialists that represent the P12 community, as well as EPPs, and as well as educational cooperatives. We've got some co-op folks serving as reviewers. These content review committees focus on the national and the state standards. From there, the program is reviewed by the Program Review Committee. This is a board-appointed committee. You will be seeing on Monday some nominations for appointments to that committee. And this group considers the feedback from the content review committees, as well as the staff reviews, and they complete a series of questions that focus on the data analysis and use of that data for program improvement. And they make a recommendation to the EPP per program through a document that's called the Program Review Update. Okay. That Program Review Update is filtered from the staff back to the EPP, and there is a back and forth as the EPP works to address any identified concerns. Once all of the program review concerns have been addressed sufficiently, if it is a brand new program, that program comes to the board with a recommendation from the Program Review Committee for approval. If all of the programs had previously been approved by the board, okay, and they are seeking continuing approval because the school is getting ready, the EPP is getting ready to go through its accreditation visit. Okay. This final program review update is shared as a part of the evidence that the EPP uses during its accreditation review. Currently, within 165010, an EPP can choose to either seek accreditation through a joint national and state accreditation process or a state-only accreditation process. The accreditation cycle for either of those is 7 years, which is once every 7 years, all of our EPPs go through an accreditation visit. For a joint national and state accreditation, both national and state trained reviewers combine to become one team and work together to conduct an off-site as well as an on-site review. Currently, under the COVID scenario, those on-site reviews have been virtual. Reviewers study and review the EPP's self-study and the evidence that the EPPs provide, and these reviewers evaluate the quality of that evidence as it relates to each of the current accreditation standards. Right now, the 5 CAPE standards are the accreditation standards, and they are in these 5 areas: content and pedagogical knowledge, clinical partnerships and practice, candidate quality recruitment, which is only for the initial level preparation programs, and selectivity, program impact, provider quality assurance, and continuous improvement. The national accreditor, which is currently CAPE, has its own decision-making process. After the national accreditation decision has been determined by CAPE, the Kentucky accreditation decision-making process begins. It begins with the Accreditation Audit Committee, which is a 7-member committee that is appointed by the Standards Board that has representation of institutions of higher education. There is one public institution representative and one independent institution representative, 2 teachers, 2 P12 administrators, and 1 lay member. Following the visit, and if it's a joint visit, the CAPE decision meets with the EPP and the state team leader and reviews the accreditation documentation. And that committee makes both accreditation and program approval recommendations to the EPSB. There are 2 schools that you will see on the agenda for Monday that have gone through this process, and there will be a presentation on the agenda by a representative from the Accreditation Audit Committee to make recommendations for these 2 schools. There is also going to be a request to add some nominations, to add some appointments to the Accreditation Audit Committee, as we currently have 2 open slots. An EPP may choose to not seek national accreditation. They have an option to seek state accreditation. The process is identical to the national, except that the review team is made up of only state team members, and they don't go through a national accreditor decision-making process. They go through the state decision-making process only. But again, it goes through the Accreditation Audit Committee that then makes the recommendation for both accreditation and program approval. And it is the board that makes that final determination. Basically, these are the stages of the accreditation process. It starts with the program review, which is kind of a review of the documentation of their programs. The EPP writes a self-study report, which is roughly 100 pages long, with 90 pieces of evidence. And basically in that self-study report, the EPP is making their case of how they are meeting the standards. The self-study report and these pieces of evidence are reviewed by the site visitors, by the teams, and the team comes together in a formative meeting, okay? And they generate a report that is then shared back with the EPP. Following that stage is the site visit. And that site visit is 3 days long. It begins on a Sunday and ends on a Tuesday. A site visit report is generated that is again shared with the EPP. And after that stage is the decision-making process. 12 to 18 months currently in advance of an on-site visit, the EPP submits all of its programs that it wants to continue to offer. Often during this period, an EPP makes the determination that it wants to discontinue offering a program. And so there's a way for an EPP to notify staff that they want to discontinue approval of those programs. But the EPP conducts and submits their self-study report 9 months in advance of their on-site visit. The off-site review is made up of the CAPE team, the state team members, and the Ed Prep branch staff members. The first step is, we identify the team members. The team reviews the self-study report and provides the EPP with a preliminary analysis in what's called the formative feedback report. That feedback report identifies areas for improvement or stipulations. And a stipulation basically is a notification to the EPP of, there's a serious concern here that a standard might not be met. And the EPP has an opportunity to respond to anything in that formative feedback report. It's their opportunity to provide more evidence or to clarify anything, and they develop what's called the addendum report. That addendum is then what guides the focus of the team when they get to the on-site review. The team, whether it's a joint team or a state-only team, conducts the on-site visit at the EPP to review evidence and any additional material. They talk to folks in an interview structured by the EPP, speak to P12 practitioners, alumni, current students, faculty, advisory councils, practically everybody that has anything to do with educator preparation at that institution. And what the team is trying to do is to triangulate all the evidence to make sure that it's all saying the same thing. The team creates a site visit report that summarizes their findings. The team does not make a determination on standards being met or not met. They recommend areas for improvement, called AFIs, or stipulations. That report is shared with the EPP, and the EPP gets an opportunity to respond to that site visit report by submitting a rejoinder. And they can agree with, disagree with, clarify anything that they want in that rejoinder. The only thing they can't do is present any new evidence. It goes through the stages of the accreditation audit, the CAPE Accreditation Council, if they are seeking CAPE accreditation. It goes to the Accreditation Audit Committee. All those documents, the self-study, the site visit report, the addendum, the rejoinder, all of that documentation is shared with the audit committee who reviews that. The EPP, who is under review, comes to the audit committee, and in person there is a meeting, and they have an opportunity to address anything that they want to with that committee, and it gives the opportunity for the committee to ask questions of the EPP. The AAC makes a deliberation and determines what its recommendations are going to be during that meeting, so the EPP knows what those recommendations are going to be when they leave that Accreditation Audit Committee meeting. It is the board then that makes the final decisions. Basically, I've got two slides here that show an overview of what the decision rules are. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the first accreditation visit because we don't have too many of those. The majority of the ones that we do are already accredited, and they are seeking continuing approval. But basically, I wanted to show this slide to show that the decisions are a little bit different, similar, but a little different. The continuing accreditation visit is what the majority of the accreditation decisions go before the board. Accreditation with conditions, or accreditation with probation. The majority of our EPPs in the past have all received full accreditation. Occasionally, we have some that have accreditation with conditions. If this is the decision, there are two options. The condition may be that the EPP provide within 6 months written documentation addressing whatever it was that was a problem. Or they can forego that written documentation and have a focused visit within 2 years. And that focused visit would then just be focusing on the problem areas. The standards board can make a determination to require both the written documentation followed up within 2 years of the focused visit. Following either the written documentation or the focused visit or both, you make the decision of accreditation or revocation. If an EPP receives probation, they automatically have another full visit within 2 years. Following that full visit, the decisions are going to then be either accreditation or revocation. Some of the other things that our branch facilitates is the field experience tracking system. The regulation 16 KAR 5040 has a component that requires 200 field hours prior to a teacher candidate's enrollment in student teaching. KFETS is the system that is available for EPPs to choose if they want to require for their candidates as a way to record and report those hours. EPPs are not required to use KFETS. They are required to have some sort of tracking mechanism. KFETS is linked to Infinite Campus. So when students identify the classrooms that they're working in, it pulls automatically the demographic information of that classroom. Because part of what those 200 field hours requires are experiences working with English language learners, diverse learners, as well as a variety of other type of experiences. The culminating experience of clinical practice for teacher candidates is student teaching. For those programs leading to an initial teaching certificate. We are fortunate to have a amount of money given by the legislature through the budget to be able to pay. It's not, unfortunately, a great deal, but it's some, to pay our cooperating teachers a small stipend. Kathy Jackson is the project coordinator for this, and she maintains the database for all the placements of student teachers that are reported to us. She verifies that the cooperating teachers have completed the regulatory requirements of training. She manages and obtains signatures from those teachers and supervisors so that those cooperating teachers can receive this stipend. And then she processes all those payments, and that occurs once a year for each academic year. In addition to the teacher preparation things through our EPPs, we are also a member of the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, which we refer to as SARA. This is a statewide agreement that is co-managed with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Its intent is to establish comparable standards for interstate offering of post-secondary distance education courses and programs. Because the EPSB has the statutory responsibility to review and approve any educator preparation program, institutions that are part of this national SARA agreement, and they want to offer programs in Kentucky to Kentucky residents leading to Kentucky certification, they have to submit and have programs approved in a similar way that our EPPs do. The EPSB has established and defined an application and review process for all out-of-state online preparation programs wanting to operate programs in Kentucky. Sharon Salzman is the contact in our branch for all the SARA institutions, and she coordinates that application and review process. Currently, we have a few SARA institutions who have sought EPSB approval. Liberty University and Western Governors University are those that offer initial certification programs. And then we have a few that offer programs that lead to rank change only. There are several different options that teachers have in order to earn a rank change. One of those options is the continuing education option, the CEO. It is a quality job embedded professional development program, leads to rank change, and can be used by the teacher to renew his or her certificate. It's an alternative to a traditional college-based program of study that's referred to as a 5th year or a 6th year. These programs allow a rank 3 teacher to earn rank 1 and a rank 2 teacher, or excuse me, a rank 3 teacher to earn rank 2 and a rank 2 teacher to earn rank 1. There are 2 different plans for CEO. There is Plan 1, which is Kentucky's version of a national board. It's a similar type of of professional development process where they, identify a plan, implement that plan, and then submit evidence around the quality of that plan, demonstrating how they have met the Kentucky teacher performance standards. Once a teacher chooses to use the CEO to earn their rank change, they can't do the CEO a second time. So if they use it to move from rank 3 to rank 2, they can't use CEO again to move from rank 2 to rank 1. They might choose, however, to seek national board certification to move from rank 2 to rank 1, because national board is one of the recognized continuing education choices. There is also a newly created one called the Continuing Education Option Plan 2. You're going to be seeing for the first time during Monday's board meeting a presentation of 3 applications for the CEO Plan 2. So that's pretty exciting that we've been working on this for a while, and we've got 3 to present to the board for you all to consider. At this point, that's a lot of information, I'm sure, to try to digest, but I did want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have at this time.
I'm probably going to have thousands of questions at a future date, but I am satisfied at this time.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I think that is very well said.
Yeah, feel free.
Very well articulated.
Yeah, thank you. Feel free to call or email anytime if you've got any questions.
I do have a question. I was trying to follow along with the PowerPoint that was sent out to us, and I know full of changes. And that was my fault. I didn't realize Cassie was going to send you those ahead of time. And this morning, as I was preparing, I made some tweaks to it to try to clarify some of the things where I thought there might be some gaps. I've sent the revised version to Cassie that she can share with you if you'd like to have it. Awesome. Thanks.
Yes, Lisa and Allison, we will send out the updated PowerPoint after this meeting to the whole board, along with the link for this meeting, so that anybody that missed it or wants to go back can review this today. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I guess I'm up to bat next. Hi, my name is Crystal Horde, and I am the branch manager of the certification area of OELE. I've been with the Education Professional Standards Board since 2006, so I'm now in my 14th year with the branch, or with the agency. Well, no longer the agency, but in my background, while I was never a classroom teacher, I did prepare as a teacher, elementary education, did a lot of subbing, and kind of life took me full circle around, and I went the pathway of human resources, and then I made my way back into education through the EPSB, in 2006. So it's this position, it kind of gives me the best of both worlds, because I enjoy working with the districts, but I work closely with the district human resources officers, with the certification officers at the universities, and kind of get to take on that problem solving approach. And I enjoy that aspect of my job greatly. So I'm going to share my screen here. Me just a minute, and I'm going to go over the what we do in certification. And can everybody see my screen now? think it should be up. If you can't see it, somebody give me a heads up if you can't. I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of what we do in certification. I know some of this was mentioned at the September board meeting, but I wanted to give you a little bit more detail. So the certification branch is charged with processing initial and renewal of certificates. A lot of our work is public facing. We're taking emails from callers and answering questions, just a little bit of everything. We get the experienced teachers who want to know how to renew their certificate. We get the people that are in college that have gone through and completed a bachelor's degree, and they're like, this is not what I want to do. I want to change my pathway and I want to become a teacher. So we get the whole scope of teachers, from brand new people entering the profession to retired teachers that want to be able to go back and, sub, or want to still, be able to do some type of, work within their schools that would fit within KTRS requirements. So we field a lot of questions from the whole range. Our branch processes over 40,000 individual credentials annually, and that is a very rough estimate, but that pretty much averages over 40,000 credentials, individual credentials annually, which that equates to over 30,000 individual applications annually. Many times people have more than one credential that they're renewing, so there's fewer applications processed than credentials issued. Telephone and email inquiries, as I mentioned, from in-state and out-of-state educators. A lot of questions about alternative routes and how to become a teacher. Our peak times of the year is May through September. More specifically, as soon as the May graduates, as soon as the first university walks across, the first graduates walk across the stage or, get their diploma, until the last rank change is issued on September 15th. Our phones and the emails don't stop. It's 150 miles an hour from middle of May to September. But it really does start picking up by the 1st of May, because people are contacting us trying to find out, what do they need to do? I want to get everything in order so that as soon as my transcript is posted, I'm ready to go. Those are the type of questions that we'll receive. Usually, in the past, our typical processing time during our peak time is 10 to 15 business days. Starting last year, we've started the process of transitioning our old paper-based certification system to an electronic system. And we are in the process right now of going through an RFP to completely replace our 18-year-old certification database. We will be completely electronic within 12 to 18 months, or so that is the goal. But in the process of going from our paper forms to our uploaded electronic applications that we have now, we have had a few little growing pains, but the overwhelming response from all applicants and the districts and even the EPPs has been that they really appreciate the fact that they don't have to snail mail paper applications into our office any longer. During off-peak periods, our processing time, which we are now considered in an off-peak time, our processing time for most applications is 3 to 5 business days. And that's assuming that when the individual sends in their application, that their application is complete. Many times we get a partial application that's missing a transcript or missing a district signature, or they forgot to fill out their character and fitness page. If we have to send an email notification to the individual that something is missing, obviously that time, that 3 to 5 business day turnaround is longer, but it's all depending on if they submit a complete application. Before I go on to the next slide, like I said, I know that these numbers were mentioned at the September 2nd board meeting, but I just wanted to give you a little bit more detail on this. Between May 1st, 2020, so this year, and September 30th, our group, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have 6 certification consultants at work, and then myself and 2 admins. The 2 admins upload all of our electronic applications and our transcripts. We've got 6 certification consultants that process and take phone calls and respond to emails, and then myself. And I'll jump in and help with the processing if needed, or help and upload applications if needed. So there's 9 of us total. Our branch processed 19,895 regular certificate credentials between May 1st and September 30th. And that was new issuances, that's renewals, but that was 19,895 credentials processed during that time. 324 principal statements of eligibility, and 197 emergency certificates. So the total credentials processed within that time was 20,416. And everybody, and that was with dealing with COVID, dealing with everybody working from home, and having to battle the occasional technology issues. So we were quite pleased. Obviously we were happy when the September 15th passed us by on the schedule, but we were quite pleased with this. And I think with the working from home this year, even though it was a necessary thing for us to do, given the circumstances, we actually processed more for that period for this year than we did the same period last year, by about it was under 2,000, but by 1,500 credentials more processed this year than we did last year. So moving on, so what we do, as I've mentioned, we issue the certifications based on regulation, and I used a slide or a PowerPoint that we had from a previous board member training, and I did not think to add in the regulation numbers, but all of our different certifications that we issue, or the different types of certification, are listed in 16 KAR 2010. Base teaching certificates are considered certifications that can be initial certification or add-on certification. These are standalone certificates. They're not endorsements. They're just they require a full area. So the birth to primary, which is commonly referred to as IECE, elementary certification, middle school certification. So that's middle school math, middle school science, middle school English, or middle school social studies. Secondary in math, science, actually math, English, social studies, and then the 4 sciences. So there's biology, chemistry, physics, and earth science. The middle secondary, those 5 through 12 certificates, those are all of your CTE areas. So you've got the pre-service CTE areas, which are like agriculture, family consumer science, engineering, technology. There's a 4th one that I always forget, but there's 4 of the pre-service teacher ed pathways that students do their preparation in college. But then also there are the occupation-based 5 through 12 career and tech ed certifications, like plumbing and electrician and auto body, and those are also 5 through 12 certifications, but they're based on having work experience in the profession, not based on going to college to complete a program for that area. There are several all grades K-12 certificates. Those include art, music, foreign language, PE, health, I'm trying to think if there's any other big ones that I'm forgetting there, but that's your all grades K-12 certifications. And then the last one listed here is your K-12 special ed. So that includes learning and behavior disorders, or LBD, moderate and severe disabilities, or MSD, communication disorders, hearing impaired, and visually impaired. Then we also issue endorsements to certificates. These areas are not considered standalone certificates. You can't just go to college and get certified in gifted education. You have to be certified with one of those base certificate areas, and then you can enroll in an advanced level program that results in an endorsement to your certificate. Endorsement areas are instructional computer technology, English as a second language, or ESL, gifted education, literacy specialist or reading endorsement, elementary math specialist, environmental education, driver education, and computer science. We also have what are called restricted base certificates. These are less commonly issued certificates because there's not any programs in Kentucky that lead to the majority of these areas of certification. However, we have to keep these certificate types. We have to keep, I'm not sure if I lost, no, I didn't. I thought I lost connection for a second. We have to keep these certificate types active because we do have people that qualify for these areas of certification through some of our alternative routes, like college faculty route or exceptional work experience route. And also sometimes we get people who come from other states and gets, you know, maybe they come to Kentucky and they have psychology certification, but not social studies. And so we have these restricted base certificates that we can issue an equivalent certification to them. So the restricted base areas are psychology, secondary sociology, secondary, journalism, speech media communications, theater, dance, and those are both K-12, computer information systems, and English as a second language. We do have a couple schools in the state that do have English as a second language as a standalone restricted base certificate area. But the majority of the schools that offer ESL offer it as the shorter endorsement program. I do believe there's a couple schools in the state, EPPs, that also offer the theater K-12 program. But again, I think those are the only two areas that we actually have EPPs offering those programs. Most of the time that if you see somebody with one of these certifications, they received it either through one of the alternative routes, like option 1, exceptional work experience, or maybe the college faculty route, or they came to Kentucky before, or they came to Kentucky having this certification already. Some of the older certificates, like prior to 2000, 1990s and prior, certificates used to be issued based on majors and minors. And so somebody might major in history and minor in sociology and be able to have both of those certifications. But we have not issued certifications on majors and minors that way since at least the mid to late 1990s. Other types of certificates that we issue, these are other instructional and advanced level certificates. We issue consultant, and this is this certification is like for someone to work as a resource teacher or like a resource to other teachers. Sometimes they're called instructional coaches, but typically they may be at the school level, working with other teachers in their area, or they may be at the district level working as an instructional coach. Requirements for consultant certification are found in 16 KAR 4010, which is the other professional school positions or other school positions regulation. Individuals have to be at least ranked 2. They have to have a valid Kentucky teaching certificate and 3 years of teaching experience in their area to qualify for a consultant certification in that area. Other certifications are school counselor, school psychologist, school social worker, JROTC, Junior Reserve Training Corps. Now, with those, I'll mention with that, one of our consultants, Norma, she handles all of those types of certifications that are military based or based on military service, this being one of those. We don't do any type of certification program for JROTC. They have to basically be recommended to us by their branch of service. And their branch of service provides a letter to us or to their district that indicates this individual has gone through the appropriate training to be to be able to teach in the JROTC program, whether it's JROTC for Army or Navy or Marine Corps or whatever the program may be at the school. Next, we have principal certification. We have supervisor of instruction, director of pupil personnel, director of special education, superintendent, and then last one listed there, substitute certification, emergency certification, and the emergency non-certified certification. Before we jump into the next slide, do you all have any questions on the type on what I've covered so far, or the types of certification? If not, I'll keep moving and we'll see if there's questions at the end. So the next slide, this is LEAD. Those of you that may, some of you may have heard about this, and some of you probably don't have, have never heard of it in your life. This is the local educator assignment data. It's a report that we do twice a year. It's required by statute under KRS 161-1211. The fall report is in statute. The spring report is required by regulation 16 KAR 1050. What this report does is the school districts are required to generate an extract from Infinite Campus of all of their teachers and their teacher or job assignments. They've upload that extract file into our system, and then we also get a file of what we call a MUNIS file, which is PSD and CSD data. That's the professional staff data code and the classified staff data code. This tells whether a person is being paid in the district as a certified employee or as a classified employee and what position they are in. So those two files of information, the Infinite Campus Extract and the MUNIS report, get input into our system. And the LEAD report was created several years ago to audit all of that information, to make sure that every person who is in a certified position holds the proper certification for that. So once that information is audited, it generates an error report, and the districts then work on fixing their errors. Sometimes it's just they've got somebody coded wrong, or they have somebody listed as a special ed teacher, but they're actually a regular ed teacher or something like that. Sometimes they're just easy fixes. A lot of times the district may not realize that a particular teacher never renewed their certification, so they're showing up on their error report as expired. So there's a lot of easy errors that the district can can work through their error report on their own. And then they do this process back and forth with us. They'll email us if they've got questions that they can't resolve. We will give them guidance. And it checks over 50,000 state educators against their jobs, their course assignments, and their certifications, what they are certified to teach. Any remaining discrepancies, well, districts are required to sign off on their final leave report by November 1st. We then work from November 1st to November 15th to clean that report up with anything else, any other manual clears that we can do. And then we submit our final report to the commissioner on November 15th. That is the date required in statute for submission of the fall leave report. So we are right in the middle of this right now. Usually it starts around the first week of September and runs through, the district sign off on November 1st. So we've got just under a month before we'll be wrapping this up for the fall. Now I'm going to talk about the alternative routes to certification. So this is kind of getting back to the certification, but you all will see some of these. I know Allison spoke to some of these routes, particularly the option 2 and the option 7. But I'm going to kind of touch on each one of these and see if you have any questions about those. Option 1 is exceptional work experience. I don't remember. I believe we had 2. I can't remember. I forgot to look to see if we had any at the September meeting. It may have been the previous meeting, the June meeting, the last time that we had exceptional work experience. But what option 1 is, if someone has at least a bachelor's degree and they've been working in a professional capacity in their field, they have a district has offered them employment, they have the ability to go for the exceptional one, the option 1 exceptional work experience if they have a job offer in that area. Some examples of the option 1 that we've done before and ones that you will see in the future, I'm sure. We've had retired medical doctors, veterinarians. We had a veterinarian not that long ago, like within the last 6 months, who had been a 30-year veterinarian, and she retired from her practice, but she wanted to be able to teach. She had a degree in animal science, so she was wanting to teach agriculture. So that one went through. We've had a chemist. One time we had a chemist who had been a chemist researcher with Avon Corporation for years, who left that world to come and teach chemistry at the high school level. So that's kind of, it's a good way, especially if somebody has connections to a district and the district knows this person has work experience in doing that work, what they would be teaching in a professional capacity. This is a good route for folks to do. If they have a job offer, they have to put together, and the district works with them on this, they have to put together a portfolio that highlights their work experience, including 3 to 5 recommendation letters from former employers. They have to provide a detailed resume. If they've written articles, if they've been published, articles about them or by them, they include that. Anything to kind of highlight why they are an expert in the field that they're applying for. Usually we will meet as a leadership team to discuss these to make sure that they meet the requirements of the statute before we bring them to the board. Usually by the time they come to you all and you all see them in the agenda book, we've already vetted them to make sure that they meet the requirements. But ultimately, you all approve these candidates once it comes to the board. So Allison, I believe, touched on option 2, so I'm going to skip over that one. Option 3 is the college faculty certification. college faculty route requires, and they have to have at least a master's degree in the content area. So a master's degree or higher. They could have a PhD in the area, that would be fine. But at least a master's degree in the content, and at least 5 years of full-time teaching experience, that content area, or the equivalent 90 semester credit hours. Now, this route is not a route that you will see. These won't come to the board for approval. The district just has to submit the documentation, submit the application verifying that they are offering this person employment. But if they have at least a master's degree in the content area that they're going to be teaching, and they've been teaching that content at a higher ed institution, an accredited higher ed institution for 5 years or the equivalent 90 semester credit hours, then they can be approved through this route. Option 4 is adjunct instructor certification. This is for part-time contract employment only. They have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree to qualify for this route, and they have to have at least a major, a minor, or an area of concentration in the area that they're getting hired. These are 1-year certificates, and they don't, these certificates have to be reapplied for each year. Part-time contracted employment, 1 year only. The district has to reapply each year for this. These are a good option if you want to bring somebody in with some specific expertise in a particular area, and maybe that person's not really wanting to give up their day job, but they're willing to come in and teach a couple classes a week to help out the district. That would be a good opportunity for the district to utilize somebody on an adjunct basis. Option 5 is the veterans route. Individuals who apply through this route, they work with NORMA. They have to have at least a bachelor's degree. They have to meet the GPA, the same GPA requirements, which I don't think I mentioned with all of these, but these are 2.75 minimum bachelor's degree or a 3.0 on the last 30 hours. But the veterans route, they have to be honorably discharged. They have to, I believe they have to have 4 years of minimum service, but that may have changed. I would have to check with Norma on that, but I know that there is a service requirement piece to that, but they do have to be honorably discharged. They either have to have a major in the subject area that they're wanting to get certified, or they can have taken the content assessment, the praxis test, and passed it and get certified that way. So if a person has a general studies degree, but they passed the high school math test, they could get certified through this route if they met all other requirements, in secondary math. Or if they had a degree in mathematics and they met all other requirements, then if their major was mathematics, they wouldn't have to take the assessment because they have the major in the content. Option 6 is probably our most widely utilized route, and Allison mentioned this one as well. This is the university-based alternative route to certification. This is one that the EPPs have to be approved for. Candidates through this route have to meet minimum admission requirements, which is either a 2.75 cumulative on their bachelor's degree or a 3.0 on the last 30 hours completed. Certain certification areas through this path may require a major in the content area. Other areas don't necessarily require a major. And then there's 3 areas: elementary, special ed, and early childhood, the birth to primary, that you can have, those don't have any major requirement on it. You can have a bachelor's degree in general studies, because the coursework that you're going to get in the graduate program is going to prepare you for what you need for that certification. Now, areas like secondary English, somebody who has a bachelor's in English would qualify for that. So this is a very common path for a lot of alt route teachers. They get a temporary provisional certificate that can be renewed for 2 additional years. So it's a total of, it's 3 years total of alternative certification. By the end of the 3rd year, they should be completed with their program. Option 7 is one of the routes that Allison's group is working on. I know at this time we still don't have any approved programs through that, but I know that that's in the works. Option 8 is our last alternative route, also known as the Teach for America alternative route. It's primarily been in Kentucky, or sorry, in the Appalachian region of the state. But it is kind of expanding a little bit to the northern Kentucky area. Some of the Teach for America Southwest Ohio, they've been placing a few teachers in the northern Kentucky school districts, Covington, Kenton County. I think maybe Boone has had some too. So they've got a few, the Southwest Ohio office has been placing a few teachers from Teach for America, but primarily the Teach for America candidates are in eastern and southeastern Kentucky. Through this program, the Teach for America is the education provider. They go through like a summer institute program that gives them their pedagogy knowledge. They have to have at least a bachelor's degree. They have to meet the GPA requirements. But actually, Teach for America's GPA requirements exceed what Kentucky's minimum requirements are, so that's never been a problem. But they have, regardless of what their bachelor's degree is in, they have to pass the content assessment for whatever content area they're going to be teaching before they can get their first certificate. They have up to 3 years in this program, and by the 3rd year, if they choose that they sign a 2 to 3 year commitment with Teach for America, and if they decide after, by their end of their 2nd year, if they're going to continue with that 3rd year and they want to pursue professional certification, then they also have to take the Principles of Learning and Teaching test, the PLT, which is their pedagogy test. And then at the end of their 3rd year, they get their full certification from us. So that was a lot of information, but I'm sure I'll probably have questions on some of this at the end, but we're almost finished. Waivers. You all will see several waivers, and we've seen increasing numbers of waivers the last couple years as it's just getting more difficult for districts to fill positions with qualified teachers. We actually have 2 waivers on the agenda for Monday. Regulation waivers that are requested by the educators and sometimes by the districts are brought to the board by the division director or branch staff, either myself or maybe Allison. Common waiver requests are consideration of advanced degrees for rank change, certificate extensions or renewals without the required graduate hours or work experience, and exemption of prerequisite degrees or certification for administrative certification. We present the waiver information typically we present that to the waiver committee first. The waiver committee takes a vote, and then the vote is the recommendation is made to the board. If there's any discussion at that time, the board may discuss, but then finally the board takes a vote on this. The decision of whether the waiver is approved or denied is the board's decision. We don't recommend one way or the other to the board. We just put the information provided to us in front of the board. One waiver you will see on Monday, or that's included in your documentations, is a person who did not meet the requirements for renewal due to medical circumstances. And then another waiver that you will see from my group or from my from certification area is waiving the GPA requirement for an emergency certification because the district has just not been able to fill. They have multiple vacant positions and their teacher candidate pool is depleted. So they're asking for a waiver of the GPA requirement. So that is the end of my presentation there. So I'm going to go back to back to the screen here. And do you all have any questions? And if there's no questions, thank you all very much. I'm going to hang on here for a little bit. So if it's like the previous comment, there was a lot of information in a short period of time. So you may think of something later, and just pass it on. We're happy to help, and we're happy to assist anytime you all do have those questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea Young. I am Deputy General Counsel and the lead prosecuting attorney for the Education Professional Standards Board. I apologize that I was not at your last meeting. I just returned from maternity leave about a week ago, so please bear with me. I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep, and I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly because you're going to see a lot of me on Monday going through closed session. And I think sometimes it is easier to go through this a little bit as you're looking at the docket, but we can't go through the docket today. So I will answer any questions that you have, but also please keep in mind that because we do discuss these cases in closed session, that is because we want to protect the integrity of our process, but also to protect the educators that are the subject of these reports. So keep the questions kind of to the process and the general items that we discuss. So you have about 6 staff members in the Office of Legal Services that are devoted almost entirely to this board, and I believe you were introduced to all of them at the last board meeting, and I do want to thank them for carrying on the work and making sure the process went very smoothly. My understanding is that the last board meeting went very well, so hopefully I can continue that on Monday. And the board has the ability to take certain actions, and that comes from KRS 161120, and that gives you the authority to sanction an educator's certificate by either revoking that certificate, suspending the certificate, refusing to issue or renew a certificate, imposing an admonishment, probationary conditions, or any combination of those actions. And when we go through those educator cases, you will see those different actions items that you have. The statute does define a revocation as a permanent or forfeiture of the certificate. So if it is not a permanent revocation, which sometimes we do, but it's a revocation for a term of years, that certificate is gone. If they were to apply for a new certificate, they would have to go through that entire process and meet the requirements of that certificate. Whereas a suspension is more of a temporary deactivation of the certificate, and there may be conditions that are attached, but that certificate is still there. And a suspension cannot be any more than 2 years. So you can't have a 3-year suspension. At that point, you're going to be looking at a revocation. And so you can take any of these actions for any violation of KRS 161120 or the Code of Ethics. And so in your materials that you have, I have linked the statute, our regulation, as well as the Code of Ethics, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'm not going to pull it up just because it is just an outline, so I don't feel that that is going to be helpful. But if you have any questions, please let me know, and feel free to go back and forth in the materials as I'm going through this. I have also included our procedures. And so I'm going to just briefly outline our process from start to finish. And the procedures also do a pretty good job of outlining that as well. So hopefully if you have questions as you're looking at the materials before the board meeting, this will help you as well. So the process begins with a complaint. I'd say a majority of the complaints that we receive are from superintendents, and that is because KRS 161120 subsection 2 sets out a mandatory duty for superintendents to report certain information. And that is any employee whose contract has been terminated or non-renewed for cause, anyone who resigns from employment under threat of contract termination, anyone who is convicted, or anyone who may have otherwise violated the statute. So that's kind of a catch-all and includes a lot of potential misconduct. I have also included in your materials a handout that I provide to superintendents when they have questions about what they're required to report, when they're required to report, what they're required to include, just some kind of frequently asked questions that may help you understand what's coming before you. But we also receive complaints from other individuals. That could be parents, sometimes teachers, administrators, other people that may not feel comfortable going to their superintendent. And we also receive complaints from other organizations, such as the Office of Education Accountability, Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And when we were not a part of KDE, we received complaints from KDE as well. Anyone can file a complaint with us as long as they're willing to sign their name to it. We do not accept anonymous complaints. Once those complaints are received, a 3-person committee does review all of those complaints, and we're looking at those to determine whether there is sufficient credible evidence that a violation of KRS 161120 has occurred. And if we do make that determination, then the complaint is opened. And at that point, it becomes an educator case. And Leah will then create a case file and send the complaint to the educator, who has 30 days to respond to that complaint. And you will see the rebuttals in the materials, and that can include mitigating evidence, just their side of the story, or perhaps them acknowledging that they did cross a line and here's what they've done to remedy that behavior. So once we receive the rebuttal or the time period has lapsed, then we prepare that case for you to review at the next board meeting. And so that is the materials that you've been presented. We do frequently grant rebuttal extensions, especially kind of now in this time period. Sometimes we have trouble serving individuals and they want to get together evidence to present to the board, or attorneys have a lot of cases and they want to make sure they have enough time to adequately give to each case. So we do grant rebuttal extensions unless we feel that it's being taken advantage of. One other subsection that I wanted to highlight for you is KRS 161120 subsection 9. You do have the ability to reconsider, modify, or reverse any decision that you've made. And so while this is not a common remedy, it has been used recently when agreed orders have been based on criminal convictions that have subsequently been expunged. If you've been keeping up with some of the expungement laws, it's been changing pretty rapidly in Kentucky, and more things are becoming eligible for expungement. And so the board has agreed to amend 2 agreed orders recently for that very reason, that the convictions had been expunged and they were able to provide evidence that they had overcome the issues that led to the convictions, and were now able to come back with conditions. Okay, so next I'm just going to go through the closed session materials briefly and kind of the breakdown of the docket. And so you will be notified by email when those materials are ready, and we do try to provide those to you at least 2 weeks in advance because, as you can tell, they're lengthy and we want to make sure you have enough time to review them. And you will also receive a closed session review chart, a checklist of sorts. And so I would encourage you to use that when you're going through the materials before the board meeting, because as Cassie will explain in our procedures, and as you have one board meeting under your belt, so you're aware, you do have the ability to vote in any way that you want. If you feel differently than the majority of the board, that's okay. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable voicing your vote, and so that checklist can help you out. If perhaps maybe the majority of the board feels that a case should be dismissed, but you feel that something more is warranted, or vice versa. So the first section that we will go through are character and fitness. I've also included a sample character and fitness page in the materials for you that has a list of questions that every educator must answer when they apply for a certificate or renew. Since most of you are certified educators, you have been through this process and you are familiar with the questions. So any yes answer to those questions is going to be presented to you for a decision. And the way we do that is we separate it out between those applications for full certification and those applications for emergency substitute teaching certifications. And the reason we do that is because anyone applying for a full cert has either been through an ed prep program, they've qualified for an alternative route, they've in a sense been vetted a little bit more than an emergency sub who is just required to have, I believe, 64 hours college credit, maintain a 2.5 GPA, and they tend to be a little bit younger and are not necessarily in this field as a career choice, but they're curious or looking for some money and they're just going to be a substitute teacher. So the board has historically kind of taken a closer look at those applications just because they have not been through that training that the full certification applicants have. And so that's why those are separated out into two different categories. And it is important to remember that character and fitness is self-reporting. So this is the applicant providing their version of what occurred. Leah does a very good job of trying to verify as much information as we can through public sources. But at this point, it is just the educator providing that information, and then we're presenting it to you to make a determination about whether that application should proceed. And so your options are to approve or deny the application. You can also defer if you believe that there's something else you need in order to make an informed decision. Another statute I do want to point out is KRS 335B, and it was changed in the summer of 2017 to basically say that a person cannot be disqualified from getting a license based on one conviction unless the crime directly relates to the position. And even if it relates to the position, they still need to be given the opportunity to be heard. And so what the board has done is if you are looking through these cases and you see that there's one conviction, you have some concerns, you feel like they may need to be denied, we're going to defer that application and let that educator know that they may be denied and give them an opportunity to be heard, to provide more evidence, more information for you to consider before you make that determination. So the next section that we'll go through are agreed orders, and I believe you did go through some of those at the last board meeting. These are settlement offers that are negotiated by the attorneys on the board's behalf. You will receive the original summary of the allegations, the full rebuttal if the educator provided one, and the entire agreed order, so that hopefully you're getting the full picture when you're looking at that agreed order. The attorneys will also be in closed session if you have any other questions. If you think that the agreed order doesn't really jive with what you're seeing, they can explain their thought process, what the evidence that they had, and why they ultimately entered into that agreement on your behalf. So you have the ability to accept those or you can reject them. And then the next section we go through are recommended orders. And now these are only going to come before you if an attorney has presented charges and the case has proceeded to a hearing. So if that were the case, you would receive the case first as the initial reading when you're making a determination of where it needs to go. You would likely send that to an attorney where they could investigate, and they might come back with you with a recommendation that it proceed to a hearing, either because the educator wants a hearing or they feel like that is the most appropriate course of action. And so then you're going to see the charges, and if you approve the charges, then the attorney is going to file them with the AG's office. A hearing officer is going to be appointed, and it's going to proceed to a full evidentiary hearing. Once that hearing has occurred, the hearing officer will make a recommended order. The board has the ability to accept that recommended order, reject it, modify it, or remand it back to the hearing officer. So you ultimately have the final say, and that is going to be in a final order. In the materials, we will also be given a copy of KRS Chapter 13B, which outlines the procedures that are to be followed in this administrative hearing process. You will also see the procedural history of the case, when we received it, when it was filed, the charges were filed, any motions that may have been filed, and anything else that's pertinent to the case. You will also receive the recommended order, the charges again, just to remind you what was approved and any exceptions filed by either party. The recommended orders that you are going to see more frequently did not necessarily go to a full evidentiary hearing, but they are what we call default orders, in that the educator has had no contact with the board or has refused to participate or cooperate in the process. And so it goes through the same process. There's just not a hearing. Charges are filed. They are provided notice. They are given multiple opportunities to respond. And then the hearing officer does make a recommended order in the same manner. During this time, my staff is going to leave the room because we are the attorneys that prosecuted the case. And because the opposing party is not present, we want to make sure that you guys are just looking at this, just looking at the case. And so you will be in there with the board counsel, with Cassie, and she is screened off from these cases. So she is looking at the same information that you are in order to help you make an informed decision. We do have several hearings that do go to the full evidentiary hearing, and you will see a few of those in the next few board meetings. Once a final order is issued and the educator receives notice of that, they do have 30 days to appeal the board's decision to Franklin Circuit Court. And we do occasionally have educators that appeal the final order of the board. You will also receive an addendum. You should have received an email today letting you know that those materials are ready. And on the addendum, you are going to see additional character and fitness cases, additional agreed orders, and potentially additional recommended orders. And that is because we try to keep the work moving. So that is everything that we've received since the docket deadline, and we don't want it to sit stagnant until the next board meeting. So we do an addendum. And we do let individuals that we work with frequently, they know those dates. We let educators know those dates so they can make sure that they have time to get everything before you.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So the addendum's been filed, so now we're done with it. We've received all of the documents through the portal to review, or should we expect some more as well?
You will not receive anything else from me, I promise, before Monday.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then lastly, we go through educator cases. And I have also included a guidance memo in these materials. I also uploaded every board meeting for you to review. It just kind of outlines certain categories of cases and what the board has done in the past, but it is important to remember that every case is different. Every case is very fact specific, and you may get some information in a rebuttal that may make you lean a different way than a case that looks very similar. And so what you're going to see with those cases are a summary of the complaint. I do try to give you as much information as I can without overwhelming you, because I am summarizing the entire case. And then you will also receive the educator's rebuttal if they file one. We do redact all identifying information. You're just seeing these cases presented as a case number. And if you believe that you have outside knowledge of a case or you are aware of what a case is, Cassie will go through the process to recuse. But that's why we do try to redact everything so that hopefully that is not as obvious and not an issue. So your options that you can do with the educator cases are to dismiss the case altogether, to defer the case for training, to admonish and train, to refer the case to an attorney, for them to review, evaluate, try to get more evidence, do an investigation, and come back with a recommendation. You can refer the case to a hearing, and that's after charges have been filed, or you can defer the case if there's something that Leah or I can perhaps get that does not require an attorney. And so in your materials, you will have those definitions. And I would encourage you to look through or read through those definitions and think about them when you're looking at the cases about what is appropriate for the allegations. And so after we go through the entire docket and the addendum, we go through section by section, then we will go back in open session and you will vote on each item. And Cassie, I think, is going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. That is a very, very brief overview of our process. Does anybody have any questions before Monday? Okay. With that, that wraps up the ethics portion. I'm going to pass it back to Cassie, and I will see you all on Monday when I'm sure you're going to be tired of hearing from me because we do have a lot. So I appreciate your all's work.
Congratulations on your baby.
Thank you.
Okay, we are nearing the end of today's training session. We are to our last two topics. And I did tell you all that we were going to do our best to get you out of here by 5. So we're on track with that. I know we've given you a lot of information today. And we by no means expect you to know all of this going forward and not have to revisit it. The intention of today was really to give you that opportunity to hear directly from staff, to get a training, and to help you hopefully feel more comfortable as we really dig into the substance of some of this at Monday's meeting. But staff will always be at the meetings to walk you through anything. We do provide you those staff notes beforehand for the meetings that will also reference the regulations and statutes that we're referring to give you a little bit of information beforehand, and then we're there to answer questions, whatever you have that you need answered. So always feel free to reach out to us. I have also included in the resources PDF links to everybody's email addresses, so you can feel free to reach out to us directly. Now, with the EPSB meetings, the EPSB and the Kentucky Department of Education are subject to the Open Meetings and the Open Records Act. This is really for transparency purposes for government agencies and boards. And the Open Meetings Act establishes the right of access to public meetings and recognizes that the formation of public policy is public business and should not be conducted in secret. This is included in statute, and the Act requires that all meetings of a quorum of the members, and for the EPSB purposes, a quorum is going to be 9 of your members, but that all meetings of a quorum of the members where public business is discussed or action is taken must occur in a meeting open to the public unless there is an exemption that applies. And in your materials, I have provided for you a outline from the Attorney General's office. This is specifically published by the Kentucky's Attorney General's office that outlines the requirements of the Open Meetings and the Open Records Act. But I did want to make you aware that as a board, as an agency, that we are subject to these transparency requirements. Now, we are always going to work as your staff to make sure that you are in compliance with that. So we do ensure that your meetings are in compliance with Open Records with Open Meetings Act. And that is why there is a set regular schedule of meetings. Currently, that schedule is that the EPSB meets at 9 o'clock on the second Monday of even-numbered months, with the exception of June and August, when the board is scheduled to meet on the third Monday of the month. And that schedule has been set up to help, especially in June and August. We see that moving it back to that third Monday does help people to be able, with the end and start of school, to be able to attend those meetings. Anytime that you have a meeting outside of that regularly scheduled meeting, for example, the September 2nd meeting of the board, that was a special called meeting. With special called meetings, there are additional requirements required by the Open Meetings Act around the notice of the meeting, that does have to be set, the agenda published and set 24 hours prior to the meeting, and you are limited to the topics on that agenda for a special called meeting. With our regular meetings, there's a little more flexibility around the agenda. However, we do like to stick to that as much as possible to give your stakeholders notice of what you are going to be discussing at those meetings. Right now, we are able to meet via video teleconference. That is part of the pandemic that we are in. But in non-pandemic times, you meet in person at the Sauer offices here in Frankfort. It's where the Kentucky Department of Education is located, specifically in the state boardroom on the 5th floor. Right now, with the video teleconference, we are meeting via Teams. We have great staff in the technology office that's able to assist you to make sure that you have what you need to get connected, and also streams our meetings so that we are complying with the Open Meetings Act. For the meetings such as Monday, to be in compliance with that, board members do have to keep their cameras on for the entirety of the meeting, and just make sure that that you can be seen by the public, that it's as if you were there in person. Now, with the video teleconference meetings, we also are required to do a roll call vote for every action that the board takes. When you meet in person, you're able to actually do voice votes, where when you have an action item, the chair would say, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say nay, and we would be able to proceed that way. However, to comply with the requirements at this time, every time you take action, you will have to go through that roll call vote, make sure to state your name, and have the vote on the record. Now, as I said, these actions do have to occur during an open meeting. However, you do also have the ability to go into closed session during your meetings. Closed session is for a specific purpose. So on your agenda, you will see that when we move into closed session, it is to review reports and complaints that could lead to action on an educator certificate, and also pending litigation. So when we move into closed session, you are limited to those discussions for which the exemption allows closed session. So if we went into closed session and we are talking through the cases and the reasons that you're in there, but then a discussion started that you wanted to go back to discuss an action item or something that was outside of the scope of that closed session, we would have to stop the closed session, move back into open session to discuss that. So we are going to have to stick to those reasons for which we can be in closed session for those discussions. Now, though we are able to have the closed session discussion, ultimately, all votes and actions do have to happen on the record. You all have been through one such closed session so far, so you are familiar with that, but we will discuss those, take notes, formulate your votes, but ultimately for the vote to count and the action to be official, you will come out of closed session, go into vote on all of those items that did occur during closed session. At this time, that is when you will want to make sure that you are recording your vote on the record. And this is the same for open session as well. Whenever there is a vote, that's when you want to let the board know that you are recusing on an item or that you dissent. As Chelsea mentioned, you always have the ability to vote your choice. So if that differs from what the majority wants, that is okay. That is completely within your rights as a board member. If you are dissenting, so if, for example, the board as a majority says, we vote to approve waiver A, you did not like waiver A, you don't think that it is an appropriate, that there were exceptional circumstances to justify that waiver. When we're going through the voting and doing the roll call, you would state your name. So I would say, Cassie Trueblood, I dissent. And that way we would be able to note for the record that you did not agree with the majority. Now, also, there is the ability to recuse, and Chelsea touched on that a little bit about how that happens in closed session. In closed session, as well as open, when you are going to recuse, you need to remove yourself from the discussion. So you would not participate in that and add any additional information. But then when it's time to vote, you would also want to state, I recuse on waiver A, or I recuse on case number 30, whatever the situation may be in front of you. Now, with the recusal, that is, again, the act of removing yourself from participation to avoid a conflict of interest. And that can either be by just removing yourself from the discussion, refusing to engage, or if you feel that even your presence could affect that discussion, then physically removing yourself from the room or from the discussion. And grounds for recusal may include ex parte communications that would prejudice the proceedings, pecuniary interest in the outcome of a decision, a personal bias towards a party, or a relationship that could just even create a perception of a conflict of interest. So we'll see these come up in closed session where maybe one of the members was involved in a report of the educator misconduct. Either they worked with that teacher or maybe they were the administrator that reported that teacher. So they're going to have additional information and have something that can at least be have the appearance of a bias. And so they would recuse during that discussion, but then also recuse on the record for the vote. Additionally, during open session, and Sherry, you're on my screen right now, so I use you as an example. Sherry serves as the Dean of the College of Education at EKU. So if there's a matter before the board involving EKU, their accreditation, their program approval, a program they're submitting, Sherry is going to make sure to recuse on the record for that. I should say, Sherry Powers, I recuse on whatever item that may be. And then that way we're able to also note that in the minutes just to avoid any even appearance of impropriety. With the meeting materials, you do hear from me quite a bit these 2 weeks leading up to the board meeting, sending you a few different emails with the closed session materials. We do, as Chelsea said, they work to get those to you 2 weeks in advance so that you have sufficient time to review all of that. We know that this is not your first job, that you do have multiple things that you are juggling, so we want to give you time to review those. Then we try to get you the agenda book with the under separate cover materials, and that's what you are going to use for the open session. We try to get that to you the Monday before the board meeting, give you about a week with those materials. And then the addendum materials, which are also for closed session, you'll get those approximately the Thursday before. And then while we're meeting electronically, I do like to send you some reminders of things just to keep in mind with meetings that are online, making sure that we remember that we're on camera the entire time, making sure to mute and unmute, always to state your name when you're speaking, things of that nature. Now, with the materials that we send you, currently we do have the document library, which you all have access to as board members, and that is available through your EPSB account. So if you ever have issues with that or logging into that or accessing that, please send me an email and we will work with you on that. We had some recent updates to the document library, so it now works better with the Chrome browser, which most people use. So you should be able to get in there and download those documents now. Now, what we provide to you as board members, those documents are for board members and board member review only. We do have public documents that are available on the EPSB's public website that the public can use for the agenda and agenda book. But with your agenda book, we include some under separate cover materials that are confidential materials that are not provided to the public. So we do ask that you please keep those materials to yourself. If you ever have someone from the public that's requesting them or asking you where they can access them, we do have those available for them on the EPSB website. Additionally, the Office of Communications here at the Kentucky Department of Education assists us with our meeting notices, and they send those out through email just to let the public know when you are meeting and what the agenda for those meetings are. Additionally, when we're talking about confidentiality, the closed session portion of your meeting is confidential as well. So we do ask that you keep those discussions that occur during closed session confidential. That's for all of the board members as well as for those educators that are going through that process. And then one thing that you will see, Chair will be making appointments to the waiver committee on Monday. And the waiver committee is a committee of board members, and it's made up of 3 board members with 1 alternate to review all of the waiver requests prior to the board meeting. And that does typically occur the same day as the board meeting, 30 minutes prior, just to get through all of those, to review them and make a recommendation to the full board. So that is really a brief overview of kind of the meeting materials that we send you and some of the procedures. I know if we're ever able to meet again in person, we'll give you some additional information and layout of the department and parking and all of that. We also have available for you, it provided in the statute that any educator who needs a substitute teacher to fill in for them when they are attending an EPSB meeting. So many of you may need that on Monday. We do provide reimbursement to your district for that. So if you are going to need a substitute on Monday, I know right now while we're in, while many of you are still doing virtual learning, your needs may vary from when we're back to in-person. But if you need that, please let myself or Sharon Chesser know, and we will get you a copy of the form that your district will need to fill out and submit to us. Once we're meeting in person, we will also have reimbursement forms for your travel as well. So are there any questions about board meetings, anything actually being through a board meeting that you want to discuss? Okay. Moving on, just to give you a little update on some of the current work of the EPSB. Again, I don't want to get into the specific agenda items that you have for Monday because those discussions really have already been slated for Monday, and we've given notice to those individuals of that. But just speaking in broader terms, you will see a lot coming forward with educator preparation. What Allison talked to you today to give you a little background on what is currently in place for educator preparation, looking at some potential changes to accreditation, program approval, as well as some proposals from stakeholders regarding admissions to those programs. Educator preparation, has been looked at a lot recently, especially as we are seeing more and more districts with difficulty in hiring and retaining teachers. And so, what do we need to do with that pipeline? So you will see educator preparation being a topic for quite a while. Additionally, regulation review. In 2017, the legislature passed a bill that included a sunset provision for all administrative regulations. There are a lot of regulations that have been out there for a very long time and hadn't been updated. The EPSB has some of those as well, but what this bill did was ultimately put into place KRS 13A 3102 and 3104, which 3102 provides that any administrative regulation that has a last effective date after March 1st of 2013 shall expire 7 years after its last effective date. So all regulations are now on a 7-year cycle where within that 7 years, you have to review them. And if you don't want to take any action, you want them to fall off the books, then if no action is taken after that 7-year period, then they will expire. However, if you want to keep that regulation, then 13A 3104 provides for a certification process where the board can either certify that, yes, this regulation is still in good standing, we want to keep this regulation as is, and then that regulation will be certified for another 7 years. Or you review it and say, yes, we want to keep this regulation, however, there are changes that need to be made to align with the statutes and the current processes, so you are certifying it for amendment. In that case, you have 18 months from the date that it is certified to file an amendment to that regulation. Now, what I referenced was all of those regulations with the last effective date of March 1st, 2013. All of those that had last effective dates prior to March 1st, 2013, they had an expiration date of March 1st of this year. So the EPSB previously reviewed all of those regulations that fell into that category and made determinations on those. Included in that was 14 regulations that were certified for amendment. So those are currently in that 18-month process, and you will be seeing those spread out through the remainder of that time we will be bringing those to you with the proposed amendments. You, as the board, are the only body with the authority to approve amendments to the EPSB regulations or to promulgate regulations of the board. Additionally, with that work of the board, you have seen a lot of discussions over the last few years around Rank 2. Rank 2 is for educators as they are progressing in the profession, how they are moving up in the classification system. So Rank 2 previously, actually until July 15th of this year, was either a master's degree or the equivalent continuing education. It used to be in regulation that an educator had to obtain their Rank 2 within 10 years of their initial certification. Now, the board, for about 2 years, heard a lot of discussion from stakeholders. We were approached by superintendents, by educators themselves, and by legislators regarding that requirement and kind of the hardship that it was placing on educators. So ultimately, in 2018, I believe it was August, the board took the action to waive the mandatory requirement that an educator obtain their Rank 2. They did not change the Rank 2 at that time. Rank 2 is still out there, is still available. The only difference is that an educator is not required to obtain that within 10 years. They have the ability to obtain a Rank 2 when they feel comfortable doing so. A lot of the discussion around that and around the hardship that it was alleged to have had on educators was that you had a lot of young teachers that were coming out of school, trying to establish their career, also establishing family lives. So they had family requirements that were keeping them from obtaining their Rank 2, as well as financial requirements. So the board did make that decision to waive that. But additionally, there's been work around expanding the Rank 2. This last legislative session, Rob did refer to this in his presentation, but during the last legislative session, there was an update to KRS 1611211, which is the rank statute, to expand Rank 2 to allow national board certification to now count for Rank 2. Previously, it was only available for Rank 1 certification, but the legislature did expand that this year so that now national board also counts for Rank 2. Additionally, you expanded as a board the CEO option to include the CEO Plan 2, which Allison discussed during her presentation, and that you will see some of those on Monday. But with that Rank 2, that really touches multiple regulations. So in our regulation review, you will also see some review and proposals that involve the renewal requirements, reissuance requirements, things of that nature. Last legislative session, we also saw a proposal that ultimately did not get passed, but did receive a lot of positive feedback involving looking at the renewal and reissuance requirements for retired teachers, especially helping those that maybe having a lesser renewal requirement in recognition of their years of service and how long they have been in the profession. And so also based on some action that the board has taken and looking at the waivers, staff will be looking at that as well and be bringing a proposal to you. The upcoming legislative session, again, the legislature will be possibly looking at the current reorganization and taking that up. If they do, that would be placed into statute and become permanent. If not, then we would likely be looking towards another executive order. But ultimately, as members, with your appointment from the governor, you will have to be confirmed by the Senate to continue serving on the board after the legislature adjourns. So we will be monitoring that in this session as well. So that is pretty much what I have for you today. Again, I know that we have thrown a lot of information at you, but we are always here to help, to answer any questions that you may have. So are there any questions at this time?
I think I think it was Julian that said it best early. That's good for now, but I'm sure I'll have questions later.
Yep. And we're happy to answer them when you have them.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't hear any more questions. The one additional thing I would like to add is just thinking about if you would be interested in reading the EPSB mission statement. I know that I've read it at the last two, but I thought it might be more inclusive if at every meeting we rotated that to a different board member reading it. I enjoy reading it, and it's a good reminder of what our purpose is. But if you would be interested in doing that at some future meeting, I guess let Kathy know or let me know. That work out good? Either way there. That's all I have. So one last call for questions. Hearing no more questions, I believe we are ready to adjourn. As a reminder, the EPSB will meet on Monday, October the 12th at 9:00 a.m. And is that 9:00 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, 9:00 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time via video teleconference. Thank you to everyone for joining today, and we are now adjourned.